see if we can get through this meeting in a timely and sensible manner. That's my prevarications done and dusted. Thank you all for taking the time to come along today. To the Children and Families Scrutiny Committee here on the 8th of December. Yes, it is nearly 2026 already, but there you go. Okay, so just before we start then, I need to make sure that everyone can hear okay. We've double checked it outside. Agenda items, agenda packs and papers are published on ModGov and are accessible directly through the council website. Please, if you make reference to any specific pages, please make say the page number, etc. There you are. If I invite you to speak, please, in the first instance, indicate your name so that people online can know who you are and what you're doing. The meeting is being audio recorded, and of course, we talk about pages, etc., etc. There are no fire alarms planned. So please, if you need special assistance, let one of our Democratic Services officers know, or should the alarm sound, please follow us out the exit and muster as necessary. I think that's that covered, and everyone's sitting comfortable. Okay, so agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Jack.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Apologies were received from councillors Pauline Khan, Alistair Henry, Jenny Snell, and Simon Carswell.
Thank you for that. So just for clarification, are there any substitutes? Okay, then, so just for 1 second, we'll have a little bit of a moan. For anyone that's listening, please remember that we have the opportunity here to substitute members. So I know that at least one of them or two of them are late minute issues, so which I understand that can't be dealt with. However, if you're unable to attend a meeting, it would be reasonable if you could reach out to your party processes to try and fill those spaces. There's a lot of us that have taken the time to come along to these meetings, and just to remind everyone that there are 110 councillors, and it's ever so frustrating when we have empty spaces at our committee meetings. I've said it before and I will say it again. Sorry, I'm speaking to the room, but hopefully the message will get out. Very often, backbenchers seem to feel a little bit frustrated that they're not able to influence the policies and decision making of council. If they haven't realised it yet, scrutiny is the way to do that. And the more involvement they have with scrutiny, the better they're able to represent the people they're elected to represent. So please, colleagues, if you can feed back to your groups the fact that the ability to substitute is there, and it would be helpful if we can fill the spaces. Lots of people giving up time to travel, etc. And in this current environment, with the ability to observe online is also there. Off of soapbox. Item 2 of our agenda are minutes from the last meeting. They've been circulated. Are we happy that they are a true record? No objections, we take that as a go. Are there any points or elements that we need to be addressed? No? Okay, moving on then. Item 3 of our agenda is declarations for interest. Members, you're asked to declare any interests which are not aforementioned in your declarations of register of interests, or any items that are specific to items that we're covering in today's agenda. Are there any declarations of interest?
Just for consistency, really, Chair, well, we probably won't be talking about fees, will we? But when we do, just put it on record that it's in my register of interest, but I do obviously pay several fees to the council in various forms.
So you make a reference to that in relation to our item on the budget and the bits that's covered there. Councillor Cravis, thank you very much.
We won't be discussing them, but just to be
No, that's fine. Thank you. We've dealt with that one previously, and no other declarations of interest. Moving on then, item 4 of our agenda is public question time. I'm not aware of any public question. There are no members of the public in the room. We're joined by Daniel online. Welcome, Daniel. And any other points? No public questions that I'm made aware of. Thank you very much. So moving forward then, item 5 of our agenda. So just for clarification, those observant amongst you will have noticed that the forward work plan of this committee and the outcome tracker have been separated, with the forward work programme being moved to the end. It is a trial which we're running as recommended by Democratic Services to see how it's to separate the two. The idea being that we may think of, as we go through the meeting, things that we may want to look at sooner rather than later. One would argue that that would be part of the outcome tracker anyway, but I'm happy to test things to see how they go. So the outcome tracker has been updated and has been included. You will notice, members, that the outcome tracker was put in at my request and has been adopted by all scrutiny committees. The idea being that myself as chair and the vice chair may not always be able to acknowledge and make a note of items that we need to pick up and do. So the outcome tracker would be part of that to do it. But also I've included it specifically because of what I call the Ofsted test. I know that when Ofsted come in, they will look at scrutiny papers, and there's often a conversation with scrutiny said that, how do we close that circle? That's what the outcome tracker is there for. So the idea will be, if things come up, we put them on the outcome tracker, and any member can make suggestions to go into the outcome tracker, and it puts a responsibility on someone to respond to it at a time when it should be responded to. And the way that it works in my head, it goes, obviously red is very outstanding, orange is, as it were, active, we're dealing with it sooner rather than later, and green is something for the future. So generally, if things are orange, what it would mean is that we're either dealing with it at this current meeting, with a view to at the next meeting it drops off, etc., etc. That loop is closed. Any points, comments, or anything in relation to the outcome tracker? Jack, did you want to say something, or have I pinched your thunder?
No, Chair, you said everything. I don't have nothing to add.
Sorry, I just, as I looked down, I saw the fact that Jack was going to introduce that, so I apologise for taking that. For any points or comments in relation to the outcome tracker that any members would like to make? Hi, Mary, welcome. Councillor Cravis.
Thank you, Chair. Only the obvious one, the one red, that obviously original date's the 10th of February 25, but we're still very outstanding and time is getting on. So I just wonder if you could, is it the J2 report?
Thank you for highlighting that. I know that Claire and I had a conversation about potentially an update from the JTI in relation to the audit committee's request. Is that relevant to that? Is it or something similar, Claire? Looking at me confused, sorry.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that can certainly come to the scrutiny committee. That's absolutely fine.
So thank you for that. So just for clarity, we've been the past couple or 3 months, we've had some issues with our outcome tracker that we're now playing catch up on. That's done now, and we're hopefully going to help address those. But yeah, so we'll note the issue in relation to the JTI update, and we'll deal with that one. Thank you. Any other points? Okay, moving on then. Item number 6 of our agenda. I'll let. Do you want to, Heather? Do you want to just introduce it quickly, and then we'll cover the points. But just for clarity, members, and forgive me, I just make it. If those of you that would have been around our scrutiny nerds would have attended other scrutiny committees will know that this is going to each of the different elements. It's coming to this committee specifically for us to look at the children and family and education points that are relevant there. I make that point because I may be. If I have to close debate when we're starting to stray into other committees, I may do that. Heather, so to you.
Only very quickly before I pass on to Christian, who's got the detail, but just to say exactly that, I just said what you've just said, Chair, that this is, your focus today would be to look at the children's elements, and you'll see that whereas if you'd seen the suite of papers at the executive meeting, there were a lot of appendices with all the different service areas in. This particular one obviously gives the overview of the budget proposals for next year, but also it has specifically has some appendices around the new savings proposals for children's, and also the fees and charges. So that was all I was going to say, and then hand over definitely to Christian, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. Thank you, Chair. Clive should be coming along to the meeting shortly as well. Okay, so Chris Evans, Head of Finance Business Partner, if I haven't met you. So the initial budget proposals paper 26-27 was submitted to Executive Committee last Wednesday. All recommendations were agreed. The 26-27 budget consultation was also opened at that point. This paper has also been submitted to Climate and Place, Communities and Corporate Resources Scrutiny. As an overview of the current situation of the budget, there is still a lot of moving parts, is a basic summary. So Clive Heafy, as Section 151 officer, has to submit a non-binding request to MHCLG before the 12th of December with regard to the further exceptional financial support. All of the councils in this position have to do so, even though we don't actually know what the settlement is at this point. The final settlement from government is due in the week beginning the 15th of December, probably more likely to be around the 17th or 18th. We're not going to close the gap in 26-27, but we are continuing to work with the services to close the gap as much as possible right up to budget setting. The objective is to reduce the request for EFS from the government, including rolling over some of the EFS relating to transformation. As you will be aware, we have appointed a transformation partner in Newton. They are due to report back on their initial proposals for transformation. Although there will be some transformation savings expected in 26-27, the majority of savings will be from 27-28 onwards. We know that the government has said that it will take on the SEND costs from 2028-29, but that councils will then need to recognise all the accumulated dedicated schools grant deficit to that point. If this does happen, without help, the Section 151 officer will issue a Section 114 notice along with a number of other authorities who would be in the same position. Again, we are waiting for the detail from the government as to how exactly the proposal would work. The new proposed council tax mansion tax will be passported back to central government after direct costs of collection. Again, we're waiting for further details on this. In summary, the budget is still very uncertain until we receive clarity on the fair funding settlement. For context, the current year 25-26 Q2 budget monitoring forecast shows a forecast service overspend of 7.205 million. The overspend is being offset by an underspend in non-service budgets, leaving a net overspend of 727,000. Without the £43 million exceptional financial support, that would show that the council is forecasting to overspend its budget by about 43.727 million in 25-26. If there is an underspend, then we could reduce the FS requirement. Effectively, that balance is kind of having the same as a credit card. The paper shows that the current revised budget gap for 26-27 is 73.367 million. The majority of proposed savings for 26-27 are coming from adults and housing at 13.354 million. Children's and families are proposing savings of just over 2 million. Detailed savings of the proposals are shown in Appendix A. The total growth requests at this stage, 43.403 million. The majority of the requests are from the people services for demand and demography, as you would expect. Detailed growth requests are not included in this paper. They are still being worked on to try and bring these down and also provide further mitigations. With regards to fees and charges, we have worked with a partner who has extensive local government experience and a track record of helping local authorities optimise income through working with services and using valuable tools such as benchmarking. They also assisted in the creation of the fees and charges policy, as you will see in Appendix C. The standard uplift for fees and charges by default for 26-27 is going to be 3.8%. So this is the CPI from September. Car parking, highways and waste fees and charges will be reported in future reports. The full fees and charges schedule, as you can probably see, is in Appendix B. As I've said, so Executive Committee opened the budget consultation last Wednesday. This scrutiny is asked to offer helpful feedback and highlight areas of further consultation, reflect on the impact of each proposal and then suggest any further proposals. As far as next steps are concerned, so all comments and feedback will be fed back into the Corporate and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of January, where all members will be invited to attend. Corporate and Resources Scrutiny will also meet on the 28th of January. This meeting provides an opportunity for the committee to consider feedback from the budget consultation, outcome of the provisional settlement due on the week beginning the 15th of September. They will provide feedback and recommendations to Executive Committee on the 11th of February, culminating in full council on the 25th of February. I'll just hand the baton over to Clive unless he wants to add any additional points.
Apologies for being late, and I was on the call with MHCLG actually on the budget issue, so time well
I'm
spent.
happy to pause if you want to let us know any exciting details.
Nothing that I can reveal in this committee, unfortunately, but the general point is that we are still in challenging financial circumstances, and you know that as a committee. I don't think there's any news there. We are looking at some changes coming out as a result of the autumn policy statement and a result of the Chancellor's position in the autumn budget, and those are mainly negative changes in respect of the council's overall finances. So we still have to work pretty hard in order to balance the budget. We were looking at the start of the year at £100 million deficit. We're looking at 70 million at the moment, and we still need to reduce that. And MHCLG have confirmed that they do expect us to balance our budget. There's going to be no special treatment for us. We will balance our budget, and we have to do that as quickly as we possibly can without EFS in due course. It remains to be seen whether we need another year of EFS to support, but the message I've got to give to you is we've got to keep a downward pressure at all times on the savings potential. We've got to look at where we can stop doing things, where we can do things more effectively and more efficiently. But we've also got to focus on the transformation programme, how we can change our models of delivery so that we get better outcome for people, and particularly for vulnerable young people that you're concerned with. And how we do that at lower cost as well. We have to do that with lower cost, which is what sort of transformation is all about. Just to touch on one aspect, obviously government have made some proposals about DSG and the DSG deficit, and they have said that from 2028 they'll be taking on board the deficit from councils. They'll be taking it directly onto government books. There's a lot of detail behind that remains to be seen. Will they simply take educational psychologist assessments and accept them? And how will they treat home to school transport? And many questions that go with that. But also what with it will bring an expectation that we will put onto our balance sheet then and recognise any deficit we hold at that point. And by that point in time, we could well be looking at a significant deficit in the hundreds of millions of pounds, which would put the council in a very difficult position and probably lead to a Section 114 report. Now, government have also said they are hinting there will be some resources to support that, but we don't yet have the detail about that. So that remains on our agenda as well. But the message I give you as a committee is that delivering the deficit management plan is fundamental and critical. The lower we can get that deficit, the less reserves would have to use in order to balance the books, and the less chance there is of a Section 114 report being issued by myself on that basis. So I know it's not great news, but I would encourage you to take some bold decisions in terms of what we need to do. We need to deliver the best possible services we can for a huge number of vulnerable people in our society, but we need to do so at a cost that's affordable as well. And like any household, we've got to balance our budget and spend no more than we get in every year.
Thank you for that. Christian, thank you for that as well. So just a couple of quick points of what I'll do actually, because remember, this committee is looking at the lines in the paper in relation to children and families and education specifically. As that being said, the only 4 proposals in this paper that are looking for savings are that are children's related. What I was going to ask if either Claire or Heather would just have a quick. So if you turn to page 52 of the papers, you'll see the 3 actually. Proposals that are relevant. I just want. It's more a matter just for background than anything else, because there are only 4, and then we'll come back to the papers. Heather, Claire.
I'll just make a start if that's all right. Claire can keep me right if I miss some of the detail. You're absolutely right. There are only 4, but they should have some over time. Should have some real improvements for us. These are, in a sense, invest to save types of savings rather than cutting things out. Let's say. So we have 4 on there. That's the top of page 52. We've got the fostering and kinship next steps. That's because we understand one of the biggest issues that we do have around our exponential or our growing spend on placements is not having enough in-house foster carers. Well, one of the things we have done in the last year or so has been increase the number of special guardianship and kinship carers that we have, and that's brilliant. But that's foster caring with connected people to the child. But of course, we also need the independent foster care, the in-house foster carers as well. So what we need, this is investing some money, but to actually reap these benefits, which is around in stopping children's places from breaking down. So the relationships between the child and the home don't break down as quickly as they might be. We keep a track all the time of what our so the horrible phrase is breakdown and placement breakdown. It's hideous. What it means is something's gone so wrong in that child's home that they can't stay where they are. So we need to make sure children's outcomes are much better if they can have more, obviously, constant homes. So this is a policy to try to, a new way of working to try and ensure that we don't let those breakdowns of relationships happen. So that's kinship, fostering and kinship care. You can give me the detail if I miss bits out there. The other one is fostering room to grow. You can see a theme coming on here. Another thing, an awful lot of people may be quite prepared to continue being foster carers, but can only take a certain number of children into their home because of the size of their home. So we're trying to find creative ways of ensuring those foster carers could perhaps get an extra room in the garden that becomes their office, and the bedroom that was used as an office if they're working from home could become a bedroom for another child. So it's just creative ways of trying to make it easier for our foster carers to continue or even become foster carers and take more children on as appropriate. The third one is Homes and Horizons. Obviously, that's homes 9 to 11. Of course, it's an extension of the contract by one home. And the idea is that we should be able to, again, for those children who've had the most challenged lives, who are in the most difficult situations, we could bring them back into Somerset and get them into a home, which is like a family home, but also has a good deal of therapeutic input. You know, the Homes and Horizons model. So that's 9 to 11 there with some savings associated. And then children's reunification, again, very important in terms of we can do everything that we can to try to reduce the number of children who come into our care or prevent them from coming in. I don't mean like a block or a ration, but to ensure that if we get the preventative work up front, that's brilliant. And we are working on that anyway to keep children where they should be for as long as possible, keep their homes right. But when they come into our care, we absolutely need to have more children going back to their homes. And whereas we manage that quite a lot, we don't manage it nearly enough. And so this reunification, again, a phrase, I think of like East and West Germany when I hear reunification, but it is about reuniting children with their families. It does take time, and it does take, because it's all relationship work, but also when they go back, you can imagine if you've not been in your family home for however many years or whatever, that family needs support and the child needs support to stay there. So the reunification process, we have to step children back down where we can into their homes. So that's like a gallop through 4 of those issues. Was there anything I've missed out that would be helpful there, Claire?
Brilliant,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just members, you're indicating that's fine. Let me just do a couple of other quick things to close the loop, and then we'll open for debate. So, Chris, could you just remind me? So, what was the Children's Services budget for 25-26, and what are you proposing for 26-27, please? Okay, the reason I'm asking the question, because in the papers that I've got, it isn't included in the papers that are circulated, and I'm busking what you find, what you do, because it also then talks about a growth request of 18.26 million but how that sits in the big numbers, I think, is important. Okay, and I think so. Our total budget is in the region of 620 million, isn't it, for the councils, and it's just a children's element. Sorry to drop it on you. If you like, I'll carry on and come back.
The council's budget is around 670 million net for this year.
Okay, so and the other bit I was going to highlight, members, so the papers you have, so so fees and charges, I'm pleased to say only a small element of those reflect to us, and they are specifically around education. And for those of the observant amongst you, is on page 110 and 111. So that's the bits that I'm limiting this debate to.
Yeah, just for reference as well. So the children's and education budget for 25-26 is a net 161,896,000.
That's this year.
Yes, that's this year's current budget for children and families. Yeah.
And the proposed budget for next year is going to be that plus 20 odd million, is it? Ish.
plus the net growth and the net growth and savings proposals. For say, we'll be coming on to those into more detail into January once we've finalised the figures.
Thank you. So let me be, so just for people observing and for members around the table, the reason I'm making the point of understanding the budget, obviously in a children's services is the second biggest budget within this council, with adults and health being the first element, children second, and then potentially some would argue highways, etc., that would fall back from there. It is a big lot of money that we're talking about. I think I can remember when the budget for this children's services was below 80 million, only a few years ago. So this is just, I think it's important to put it into context of where we are. Heather?
Say, forgive me. I was just going to say that, and thank you for that context. Context is really brilliant because, forgive me, I wasn't quite as all over these papers as I often am, because I'd seen the full papers at Corporate and Resources Scrutiny. And you're right, when I came to look at it, I went, oh, hang on, there's that contextual element which might have been a helpful thing. So forgive us for not putting those in. And I think similarly, if I had my time over again, I'd be saying, of the hundreds of pages or tens of pages of, say, the fees, it'd be quite nice to have the extract of the bits for children, because I was looking to find them. So I apologies for not raising that one sooner.
So thank you. So I wanted to make that point because these papers have been going around, and what I was going to say was I still believe, I think, and then members please shoot me down if I'm wrong, that the appropriate elements of the budget should be going to the appropriate scrutiny committees to allow the experience and knowledge of those members to be able to at least influence it. And forgive me, just to I'll stay on my soapbox for a second. Also, that goes for in-year spend as well. I understand that the budgets are the spends are going to the appropriate to resources committee, etc., but we need to find a way of highlighting any concerns to the appropriate scrutiny committee at the earliest opportunity. I'm sorry, it's too late when you're a couple of months gone behind. I don't want to make any further work for any officers, but previously this committee has been charged with monitoring the spend of our children and services. Without that information, we can't be doing anything. And I sometimes it feels like my arms and my legs have been tied behind my back with a blindfold, and we're having to make up. I'm sorry to make I think this is the point. I've tried making it previously, but I'll get off my soapbox soon, members, and you can jump in. Claire, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in terms of the budget that obviously the 161 is the revenue grant. If you add in the schools grant, that's another 400 million, I think, the schools grant on top of that, which obviously is not directly on our books, as the finance director said, but the impact of it, of the spend of that being overspent has a significant impact potentially in terms of on the council. And I think it's really important to see the whole envelope for children's services, that, okay, yeah, revenue is 161, but that schools grant, a lot of which is passported directly to schools, does have a really significant impact on the council and on children, if we get that wrong, basically, or if there's not sufficient for the needs of the children's in Somerset. And it's important to keep that in mind, I think.
I think, thank you, because I was then going to do a little bit about the DMP and the monitoring of that, etc. And again, forgive me, Heather, you've heard me say this, but I will say it again, just for this committee. At executive, I highlighted to the executive this committee's concern that one of our recommendations in relation to a specific DMP monitoring board wasn't in place, and the executive member has acknowledged that, and it's being done. But I wanted again just to remind members, because one of the things that I found most interesting when I started looking into how the budget is, people don't realise that if you include the education budget within the children's services budget, it is the biggest spending area of this council. The fact that potentially it's other people's money is in it, but the reason I'm looking at it is because the overspend of our high needs grant, and that's potentially in money that we could be earning interest on that could then be fed back into the council for better doings. And so the fact that we're holding an overspend means that there's a potential income stream there, which would be helping the council do its business better. Tell me if I'm wrong, Clive. Is that
You're absolutely right, Chair.
Yeah, so that's something that we have to consider in this, because previously it's only in recent years that the education budget element has become more transparent about it. Previously, it was something that was done behind the scenes, etc. So the point I'm making is about the DMP monitoring, and just to reiterate, the reason that it needs to be a small group of people with broad experience is because we're agreed at the previous meeting of this committee, we agreed a number of policy changes. That would have a bigger impact going forward. My concern is that we're agreeing lots of little bites and not seeing how big the whole is becoming. And we need to, someone needs to be looking at that and doing it, which is why we've made a suggestion in this committee to the executive when they were asked us what we were doing to create this separate board to do. I know there are officer boards. I know that there are lots of different people looking at it, but I don't think the member element is being dealt with sufficiently. Okay, off a soapbox. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join your soapbox very happily. Now, and particularly on actually scrutinising the things that are in the dedicated schools grant, particularly as it actually funds quite a lot of the work that this authority does. As well as what schools do. There are things specifically on the budget proposals, the things that I want to ask and say. The most cost-effective thing, as well as being the best for all children, would be to enable them not to come into care in the first place. And so the second thing I would say is that reunification is not only about rebuilding relationships, but if the reason that there must have been a reason why the child came into care, so if that is to work, we need to know what is being done with families whose children are in care to enable them to look after their children. And that doesn't, I suppose, what we haven't here is how's this all going to work? We've got a savings proposal here without anything about what we're doing. How can we, and it's quite difficult to have any useful scrutiny of this without actually knowing what it means in practical terms. So I'd like a bit more on that. The most expensive thing for this authority is to get any of these wrong. So I would like to know how we're going to get them right. And I would really like some really quite detailed feedback, preferably at this meeting, because I think we all need to hear it, as to how this is going to help, how the service redesign and development is going to boost recruitment of foster carers. We have been trying to do this for years with lots of different redesigns. How we are going to create in-house fostering capacity and not be seen as, oh, well, you can throw your own children out of home and house and home so you can carry on being our foster carers. I know that's not what's meant, but that's how it'll be, how it could well be seen. I absolutely, the extension of the Homes and Horizons programme, absolutely. I think I understand that well enough, except we do need more for children who are not quite at that level, because that I suspect now we have a plan for the Homes and Horizons needs. We have what is the plan for the slightly lower level than that, but still probably for a long time going to be in residential care. So really my questions are, how's it going to work, and why do we think it's going to help and not put our costs up?
So thank you for the question, Francis. Just to offer a small line of defence in the first instance, and the four topics there, I'm assuming there is a suite of documents that sits below them. So if it's relevant to, then I'm assuming that those documents can be shared. So sorry.
It would have been really helpful if they'd been shared before the meeting with the committee.
Okay, so
Okay.
Happy to come in. I just want to say, I think one of the things you're right, and this is one of the things with the member oversight board that Chair was mentioning before, is these are, if you think of both the improving the way we prevent children from coming into care and improving the way we look after them when they're in care as one block of something we know we have to work really hard on, and the other one being, say, the DMP and the associated special educational need function. Those two areas we absolutely know, and they both have lots of little levers in them, or big levers in them, which I struggle sometimes, and I've been in all the transformation meetings, to get the overall picture. So I think there's something I'm going to take away is how can we kind of make almost a schematic or a diagram for those two things, particularly for you to see. So I think that would feel more helpful even than another 30-page document full of detail. I think seeing I would benefit. So let's try and do some of that. I think just to say later on in the agenda today, we have got Callie and Jane here, who will be talking about the internal fostering update. Now that will give you some of that, how these things hang together, which hopefully I think would be helpful, because you are right, fostering is something we've been trying for years, way before I've been here. And when I was at the conference the other day, listening, the National Conference on Children, we're all struggling across the country, as when you were going to those conferences, Francis, we're struggling because there's a gentle erosion of the numbers of people who want to come forward. So we absolutely know we have to be as creative as we can be, but understand that might not be the only thing. So we've got something coming up on the fostering and kinship. Later on, when we go into a private session, because I think some of the workshopy things are particularly good, it will be somewhere where I'm sure we will share with you some of the work around how we could use a model similar to the Homes and Horizons to actually have homes that are in our control, where we can be much more smart about the costs that are there, and in a sense continue to join the market and disrupt it somewhat, which is what's needed. So that we'll talk about that towards the end. Might also mention, but I'll mention it here because I think we can, which is the work that we're already doing to try and create a sort of it's a Southwest Alliance where we're building relationships with the 14 or 15 local authorities in the Southwest area to try and work collectively, so we're not in competition with each other. That's a little bit like the regional care cooperatives that are being talked about, but we were kind of starting that before they were talking about it. So I think that's something else, but we'll probably talk more about that when we get towards the end of the agenda. I think one of the points, and Claire might come into support with this in terms of partly is how we've done the restructure from April, but then also how we want to run the way Children's Services works. We have to be much better at stitching together our education teams and our social care teams. So I think there's references in some of the ones in here about about family intervention services. We're working on that all the time. So again, if I'm thinking about how we look at try and get a schematic for us all, for everybody, not just for you, Francis, but everybody, to see what these things are. Let's try and get you the shape as quickly as we can, so you can see what that's like, and that will hopefully see how they stitch together as well. I hope I haven't missed anything out in the answers wise there. Would you want to add anything on that one, Claire? Oh yeah, sorry. And of course the fostering agenda item as well. So that's helpful as a starter. I'm conscious. I think we could have sent business cases to you, but I think, and we could have done this, suppose, perhaps we may yet. But I think seeing the overall schematic would be as helpful as seeing the detail of the various bits.
I support that. The request, if there's some more, there's the detail, but these are headlines. We can't necessarily scrutinise headlines. Councillor Hunt, John.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to start with, Councillor Nicholson sort of pinched a bit of mine actually, which is great actually. Yes, she does. So on fostering, we've always had problems, obviously, but we have had problems getting foster carers in the past, and are currently still doing so, as far as I know. I noticed on here there's some savings added, which is good to hear. So in 26-27, it's what's that, £48,000. 27-28, it goes up to $750,000. Is that $750,000? Okay, so that's a big number, and My concern really is, have we thought that number through, and how did we get to it based on, I've got two other questions to come actually, but how do we get to that number based on the fact that we're struggling now to get foster carers? Is it a new approach that we've not tried before? So that's question one. Two, Homes and Horizons. I love Homes and Horizons, best thing we've ever done, I think. I'm just a little bit confused by the numbers on here. Firstly, 26, 27, there's no savings. I'm assuming that's because project number 11 hasn't been found and developed. So based on that, and if I'm right with that assumption, the £800,000 savings in 27, 28, I'm assuming that money then comes directly because of number 11. And I'm a little bit confused why we've got 9 to 11 homes there. Is that those three added together, the 800,000? Or is that just the addition of one additional home, or the 11th home, if you like? And just finally, if I may, on reunification of children, which is a wonderful thing, and I fully appreciate how hard that is to achieve. Again, it's how do we get to these numbers? Because the first one for next year is almost £1 million, a lot of money. How do we look at that and say, this is how we save? Because from what I see, I think you described it as investment to save, and we're investing to save. So we're spending more and then getting back another million as well. So that's the three. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I could answer those. So the questions you're asking about fostering are largely covered in the fostering presentation in today's meeting. So obviously, if you have further questions after that, we can go away and pick those up. But they probably will be answered today. For Homes and Horizons, the savings will be made for homes 9 to 11, so for the 3 homes, but they will open. So home 9 will open next year, home 10 will open probably the beginning of the year after, and the next one after 11 the year after. And you can't just put 3 children or 2 children in them as they start, because they're very complex. So actually the saving that you make is quite small incrementally, and it builds over time, which is why it's building into 27, 28 rather than largely in 26, 27. And what was the final one? Reunification. Yeah, so we have our business cases for these, which you're welcome to see if you want to look at the detail. The reunification one, sadly, £1 million of saving is 3 maybe children coming out of residential care. It's very, very expensive residential care. So if we took 3 children from residential care and got them home, we'd make £1 million saving in less than a year. Yeah. Yes, and if it's if children have to come into residential care, we put £1 million in the budget and they overspend instantly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification. What we're talking about is the care required to keep the young person safe. So it's not the young person that needs this that is drawing the money. It's the fact that we're putting in place the framework to make their life chances better. Thank you. It frustrates me hearing us talk about as if it's the child's fault sometimes for the cost of the placement. It isn't. It's us putting in place the best possible solution that allows them to be, and the closer to home they are, the better. Thank you. Councillor Hadley. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. It won't surprise you that obviously my questions or my statements are on the similar sort of along the same lines. The 4 areas that we're making savings are the 4 areas that are going to affect children directly. A lot of the savings or a lot of the costs in the budget are peripheral stuff that won't actually affect the lives of the children, but these 4 areas, that £2 million will go some way to affecting children's lives that we're looking after, and that does concern me. I know we're going to get further information soon as to what's going to happen, and I'm hoping that will allay some of my fears. But it does worry me when we can raise £12.5 million for refuse collection, and we can't raise £2 million to keep the children's programmes as they are. But I'm sure you'll put me right on that.
So the purpose of these savings is to improve the outcomes for children. So by having more foster carers, it is better for children to be in foster care than it is in residential care. If we can improve the quality not the quality, the quantity of foster carers, and also retain our foster carers better, as you'll hear in a while, then those children have a family home to live in. We need to invest in the support teams for foster carers so that those children can stay in foster care. So although it's a saving because it's trying to keep children in foster care and prevent them escalating into residential care, it's not trying to remove money from supporting children. It's saying support children in the right place, which is in foster care, which we haven't done previously to the level that we need to do it. So that one is about trying to improve the outcomes for children. The room to grow is the same thing in terms of trying to increase the number of foster carers or foster beds that we have available with our foster carers that we currently have. And we have a couple of these that have already happened where we've provided home offices so that foster carers can move their office out of a bedroom and take another child. And that's been very successful in the small number of cases we've done so far. So we're confident about that one. Homes and Horizons is about taking children out of illegal placements, which are unregistered with Ofsted, because nobody will take these children. So the most vulnerable, the most complicated children are in the most unsuitable, unstable placements, basically. So having Homes and Horizons in place will mean that those children can come into registered provision. And it's only a saving because unregistered care is so expensive. So unregistered care is about £17,000 to £18,000 a week. A Homes and Horizons home, if it's full, is £6,000 to £7,000 a week, roughly. So it's not trying to reduce the spend on children. It's saying if we did it better, then the cost would naturally come down. Does that make sense?
Can I just come back? I absolutely agree on the foster care. I'm Homes and Horizons' biggest fan.
Yeah.
So I absolutely understand what you're saying. But it just seems a shame that we're taking the money out and not putting it into actually increase even further the amount of foster carers and foster homes that we've got and reunification places that we've got, rather than just taking the money away.
I think most of everyone around this table have been big advocates of Homes and Horizons, but also I've tried to remind us all to have an element of this little steps, because we don't want to put too much of the burden on them. So that's fine. Peter, Councillor Hayton.
Yeah, I think everything's been covered that I was going to say. My only other question was around kinship fostering, and I'm happy to take that later if you want, but it's just about safety around that.
I'm sure that will be covered later, and unless Jane's going to tell me any different, okay? Kinship's part of the, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, thank you, Peter. Marcus, Councillor Cravis.
I'm not first this time. Thank you. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. On your first name, I can't believe I've got anyway. I think I'm all scrutiny out, actually, especially this item out. Yeah, I mean, we talk about little steps and Homes for Horizons, and probably got that wrong as well. We go from 9 to 11. In an ideal world, how many would we have? And is it because one, there's financial issues, one, there's capacity issues, two, there's just and don't take this against this directorate, but maybe I look at other areas of the council, I think there's a lack of ambition. I'm sure it's not in this department. So what is there an ideal situation where you'd say this is how many we'd have? That would be that one. My other one was, we touched about the cost of children in care, etc. earlier, and obviously I refer you to my question I made to, was it corporate scrutiny? About, I had a little bash at I was corrected by the chair, it's the Ministry of Justice, not the Judiciary. Yeah, how much, if they got their act in order, or maybe worked a little bit quicker than they could do, because they weren't having, I don't know, afternoon tea or something, whether we could make a few savings there, and and whether, actually it's a good one for the forward plan, Mr. Chair, that maybe we never really, did we ever get that report, or were we actually trying to have a meeting with them or bring them into scrutiny?
Remind me again.
I seem to recall in the past that the people from the Ministry of Justice were meant to be coming and seeing us. Was that right? And they never did. And that was in Sedgemoor, I think I remember. Was it just reports? But it's those savings there when you look at the figures involved that you just talked about. I understand what we say about fostering. Is that a generational thing? Is it a way of life thing? Is it because everybody's now working? You've got probably two people working full time just to try and keep a roof over their heads. And then, by the time you get rid of your own kids, do you want any more? I think we've got one, the last one. we're on the last one. Yeah, and so how do we broach that? Because obviously it's I'm not going to say special sort of person, but probably not. Probably someone could word that better than me, I should think. How do we deal with that whole generational thing there? And excuse me for being silly, but I mean, I now understand the growth thing, and we've got 18 million growth, but I'm going through the other papers from corporate scrutiny and saying, well, just generally that 18 million growth, what is it? Or where, and actually how accurate is it? Because we all know from one thing I have learned with this budget is it's not very easy, is it, to budget in this committee? So just that was my questions.
Councillor Cravis, thank you, because you've identified something, the point that I'd waited for to see whether anyone actually noticed. So congratulations for that. So page 40 talks about the forecast growth requests by directorate. Okay, and the point I was going to draw the committee's attention to in a minute is we've been asked by the executive, so the recommendations as detailed on page 32 talks about consider the current barriers to the budget growth, which are outlined there. And I've written down here detail. I'm sorry, I don't think so. One of the points I was going to make in a minute was the fact that how can this committee consider your £18 million growth bid when there's no details there? We've been asked to look at savings, and again, there's a lack of detail there. This is our area is quite small, but the budget is quite large. So I think rather than over this side, the point I'm making to our 151 officer is the executive have asked us to consider some bids, and there's an 18.267 growth bid that's going in, but I can't find the papers that relate to that in this pack. Have I missed something?
Chair, they are the proposals of the service, not of the finance department. So the service is best placed to answer them, not the finance department.
Okay, so.
Okay, so if I go through Councillor Clovis's questions in order. So the need for Homes and Horizons in terms of the number of homes that we need. So the model was built on the basis of the most complex children and the number of children who are in what are called unregistered placements. So placements not approved by Ofsted, because nobody else in the country who is registered will take those children. We expect that by Home 11 we will have located all the children that need to. So we know on a day-by-day basis, we talk about it daily, the number of children who are in unregistered care. It does move up and down a little bit, but we know the number that is sort of the average number, and we think by the time we get to Home 11 we should be at a point where we no longer need any sort of unregistered provision. So that's always been the model, and that's the plan. We thought we'd be able to do it by Home 10, which is why we had the contract for 10, but we think we need a little bit of space, a little bit of headroom, which is why we're going to 11. In terms of fostering and why the change in the fostering population, if you like, I think you're entirely right. There is a generational change in terms of what people want to do, in terms of working or what they feel able to do in terms of income and working in a career. In terms of fostering is not seen necessarily in the same light as it was before. I think all our savings in terms of our investor save are about trying to retain the foster carers we've currently got by putting in excellent support for them, so they will feel they want to continue to have that role. And we are increasing the number of foster carers very slowly. It's against the national trend. We are increasing them very slowly, so we want to be able to continue to increase and retain as we get people in, and not that people don't leave and do other things. And then in terms of the accuracy of what's the growth for that £18 million in general, the work that finance have done on this is with the service is it's largely about external placements so children who are not placed in our foster care or in Homes and Horizons. The cost of those children is very high, largely in residential. The inflationary increase, because the budget is so big, or the cost of those children, the care those children need is so high, is obviously a large number, even if it's only 3.8%. And we also know that a lot of private equity-backed providers are making profits above that 3.8% inflationary rise. So we need to put an extra sum on top, because we know that is going to happen. And we also know that because of the lack of foster carers, that more children are having to go into residential care when they need a foster placement. So the growth also includes additional children who are likely to need residential care because we have not got sufficient foster placements. And that all in the round brings us to that largely that £18 million figure.
Thank you. It might have been helpful if we had that in this, because it would have saved the question I'm going to ask. We're being asked, so I've got no other members to ask any questions, so I'll stop for that for a second, and I'll sort of try and find my way forward now. So we've been asked by executive to feed into their decision making with the information that's been provided for us. So I think the committee may feel that we didn't have as much information as we could have had to be able to make those decisions. Heather.
And if I may say, I think you're right. I mean, again, I think, I don't know if we're doing this a different way to the way we did it last year. I don't know in terms of which part of scrutiny has been looking at which part of the budgets and so on. But certainly, as I say, as I looked in more detail, for instance, in page 40 on the main report, there is a bit underneath at the very bottom of that page saying that there is still this collaborative process going on between ourselves and finance working together to work out mitigations or any changes to those growth bids. And that would come back to a later meeting. So there's that bit that's kind of hanging there. And also I noticed in the recommendations, the recommendations still look like the executive ones where we're asked to comment on all of the growth bids, not just the ones for our own. So I think we've kind of, and I'm saying we, because I'm as responsible for this as anybody else, but we've managed to put in front of you something which isn't quite bespoke to what you need, nor is it entirely what went to the full executive meeting so you could pull it out. So I'm happy to take away that in terms of, and work with everybody so we can make sure next time we come forward, we're not asking you to do something that you're not equipped to do.
Thank you. So I'm going to make these into recommendations as I go. So the first recommendation, the first bit we're feeding back to the executive is that this committee felt that they couldn't make the adequate decisions because the papers were lacking. I think that covers a lot of where we are, and that included obviously the growth, the savings, the overspends potentially for the budget gap, which are the main bits which are relevant there. I think the other bit that Councillor Cravis.
Just gonna, because I was thinking, do you mind if I just come back quickly? I mean, I appreciate it's, we've probably got a long meeting ahead of us. I was just thinking about fostering, and obviously you talked about the extra support by, putting an extra room and stuff like that. But what about things like, I don't know, I mean, I presume with some of the more difficult fostering children, is there other support from health and how much is that, and do we feel that that's adequate, and what sort of things do they support? I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
I'm just conscious we're jumping into potentially items that we're going to cover in a minute, and
in the next one.
Okay.
There
may be a need.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say, there may be a need for more information to come back to us to help us make the decisions that we're being asked to by executive. I'm just making sure I'm being conscious of who might be listening in what I'm saying. That's why I was slightly, I didn't want to be too critical. So, but there's also a recording going to be made, so I have to be careful where I am. So the fact that we're being asked by committee, by the executive to make some decisions, the first bit we're feeding back is we don't think we can make the decisions based on the information that have been provided.
Chair, I need to step out at 3 for an urgent call, I'm afraid, but in general terms, it'll be coming back to a joint scrutiny meeting on the 3rd of January and again at the end of January, so there'll be more than one opportunity. 5th, is it? Sorry. Yeah, so I was getting my dates wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for letting me know about the
go back to New Year's Day if you like.
Step out. But,
so there will be further opportunities to scrutinise, and we can take on board your comments then to bring further detail back.
I'll let you get out, but I acknowledge the point I'm making, forgive me, is that if we had that information now, we wouldn't be in this position of having to go to other committees to feed back. And one of my gripes, I'll say it out loud, is the fact that potentially this committee and the committees have been taken out of the decision making because we were not being given sufficient information. If we had it, we wouldn't be in this position. Sorry. Carry on, Clive. Thank you. Yeah. So first one is we're feeding back is the detail. We haven't got enough detail. I'm sorry to be able to for us to make the decision. I'm
As well as,
I'm trying to be as forcefully,
well, I'm not.
delicate.
I'm not delicate.
I'm just conscious. Okay, so I think the recommendations from this bit from this committee are going to be, first of all, we can't make this the adequate decisions. We haven't got the detail. Secondly, there's an issue around the deficit management plan, the fact that some of our recommendations have not been implemented around that, and this committee wants to reiterate the importance of that proposed group. Yeah, so those are the detail around all of the questions we've been asked. I think is the relevant bit that's there. I think people have heard. I'm just conscious. Have I missed? So the DMP and the lack of detail. So we can't make recommendations without that detail. Hopefully that when it comes back next time, it will be more sufficient. Is there anything I've missed, members? Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, right, okay. Over the time when I started, there were about 300 children in Somerset's care. It's now knocking on 700. What is the consideration in terms of budgeting that trajectory, and what do we think that there is something in the wind that would help change? And if there isn't, then growth or pressure, whichever word one likes to use, is hardly going to be a transitory thing.
Thank you. So I'm conscious that we need to be considering the papers that are in front of us at the moment. Yeah, no, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Is the fact that we can't hold the officers to account or the executive to account without the information that we need, and there are multi-layered because I could add a few to the list as well. But I just want to make the point that and it'll feed back in to the executive that we need more information. I think now those are the 2 points that are relevant. Heather.
And I just wanted to catch that. I think one of the important things that I've been, as you would expect, we both do this in our own way, is I think it'd be quite nice if when we do bring something back, we're also able to give you some assurance around how we are modelling. I'm not saying necessarily take you through all the modelling detail, but to give you some assurance about what makes up those numbers, because there's an awful lot of work going on in the background to try to do that, that projection work. And I've been I've been more assured in the last number of months about the work that's going on. I think that'd be quite good to share with you as well.
Okay, thank you, members. I'll draw that item to a close. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 7 then. Education, health and care plan, timeliness, to be introduced by Claire.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So I'm introducing this in the absence of the senior education psychologist, and the Director of Education is still unfortunately unwell, so not able to be here today. I won't go through the report. I was intending to just go through the slides so that you had an overview of where we are and what we're doing to try and correct this position. I think everybody's got the slides in their pack. So you'll see there that in the first slide that the requests for education healthcare plans has increased by over 30% in the last 12 to 18 months. There are now more of those requests progressing to assessment.
Is anyone able to share the slides if you're talking to them? I know that not everyone has direct access to them. No? Okay.
I've only got them on the ModGov, I'm afraid. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Well done. You move to the next one. So more of those requests are progressing to assessment. We did have so the let's go back a stage. So in terms of the legislation in relation to education healthcare plans and requests for those, it is a very, very broad definition. So a request for an education healthcare plan is when a child has or may have a special educational need or disability. That's obviously incredibly broad, and a lot of children, most children, could go through that gateway if that's what people chose to do. We had a broad brushstroke approach to it. We then moved to a position where we felt that we could be more confident in saying, no, actually, these children do not require an assessment. A lot of those children then they were taken to tribunal, and the court turned that back and said, no, we think they do need assessment. So on the basis that obviously going through a tribunal process is very distressing for families and for children and for schools, we decided to move back about 12 months ago to our original approach, which was much broader and allowing a lot more children through that initial gateway, if you like, in terms of saying we will assess a lot more children. We also have amended the way that we work in terms of stage 2, which is when we say, right, we've had all these assessments, are we going to issue an education healthcare plan or not? And again, we've moved from a position where we were quite stringent in saying, no, we're not going to issue these. And a lot of those went to tribunal. And again, you have a lot of stress in families, etc., to looking at the reasons that the court have given for why those plans should be issued and saying, OK, we need to issue more of these plans. Obviously, that means just naturally there are more children in the system because we're allowing more children into that system. And we've also had more people applying for education and healthcare plans as well. So the volume of children and assessments in that system is growing exponentially. And because of that, fewer of those education and healthcare plans in the system are being finalised in an appropriate way at 20 weeks. So a second slide there. So you can see that the timeliness of those education and healthcare plans in terms of the statutory timescale is within 20 weeks from request. From assessment, they should be issued. We were down to at the end of September, which is the data here, 2.3%, which is very, very poor. And in October, that would decline further to 2%. And at the end of November, that has increased slightly to 2.8%. The reason for that is because of the education psychology requirement. So every child who needs an education healthcare plan assessment has to have an education psychology assessment. We would expect that education psychology assessment to take about 6 weeks. It's currently taking to be completed 22 weeks. They're not taking 22 weeks to do the assessment. It's taking a long time to get to the point where they can allocate it because we don't have enough education psychologists in the system to be able to do the work. That is a national problem. Every local authority is experiencing this. We are at the more severe end of this, but everybody is experiencing it to some degree. We have, because of the way that independent education psychologists work, we can't just go through the usual locum market system and just say, we'll have 20 education psychologists, please. Because education psychologists tend to work through consultancies, we have to go through a full procurement process and a full tendering process, which takes 4 to 5 months to get to the end of. So we have now got to the end of that process, and we have now appointed some consultants to do that work. The first lot started in October, November, and we've got a further tranche starting in January. So that is starting to have an impact, as you can see, in terms of the timeliness is starting to go up very slowly. We do need to do more work and on an ongoing basis because the flow, if you like, of requests coming through the system and the backlog changes all the time. So the number of education psychologists we need to do this work, to both deal with the inflow and the backlog to get us to a sensible position, changes all the time. Yeah, just don't even need to move just the slides on a little bit. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that one. You can move to the next one.
Key challenge is probably the best one.
Yeah, that one.
Thank you.
So, as I've said already, increased requests for those assessments. We've talked about it here being increased legal compliance, but it's looking at tribunal decisions and thinking, let's just take the distress out of this as much as we can. And we think the reason for this, in terms of the increase of requests, is largely a national issue, and you can see it across. Talked to lots of DCSs about this. Because of the lack of SEND reforms. So SEND reforms were meant to come in the autumn, and they didn't. And then they were coming in December, and they're not. And then they're meant to be coming in January. We don't know if that's going to happen. And nobody really knows what these SEND reforms are going to say, because, you know, there's lots of rumour and myths all over the place in terms of in the press and everywhere, like there is with everything coming up when things change, that parents and schools are getting increasingly anxious about what is this going to is my child going to get the support that they need? Is it going to be funded? Will it be statutory? Will there be a legal document that says my child has to have this? Or is it going to look very different? So parents are increasingly applying for education healthcare plans now because we're still in the current system. So they're confident that their child will get the support that they need under the current system. That's causing a national avalanche in requests and therefore increased numbers of education psychology assessments as well as everything else also required. So as you can see on the next slide, education psychology services, we have reprioritised to maximise our capacity. We have got these additional interim staff coming in. We're also recruiting to more permanent posts because there's been an agreement through the deficit management plan that we need to do that. Because there are so few education psychologists in the country, it's great to be able to recruit, but it's really difficult to get the people into the roles. Talked about the relief staff, the national workforce. We have agreed remote assessments so that people don't necessarily have to come to Somerset and can do some of those very more simple assessments online so that we've got a time frame that's quicker. And we are doing the majority of those assessments in order of date because we feel that it's unfair to prioritise people who've just come into the system, but we are making exceptions for children in care. We're prioritising them because they are the most vulnerable children in the county. And when we've got phase transfers, so children moving from primary to secondary to FE or whatever, where that's particularly complex, and we know that's going to be particularly complex, we are prioritising those children because we know it's going to take a long time to make that work effectively. And if there are other exceptional circumstances that might be one-offs, we're looking at that. So education psychology triage everyone that comes in to say what level of priority should we give this particular situation. The locality working, where we've got SEND working in local areas alongside education engagement and FIS. We are using that process to support waiting well. So we're supporting schools where we've got children who are waiting for those education psychology assessments as part of the HC plans to make sure that wherever possible, those children have the right support while they are waiting. It's not perfect by any means, but we're doing our best to try and make sure those children have the right support in that interim period.
Thank you. So a few questions then. So how many young people are currently waiting? I was just trying to figure that out on the list. It looks to me, so is the one above it, the requests, I think that's the one where I was trying to figure out where it is. So you've had 1,005, I can't see what the numbers are.
So the number waiting is about for their initial assessment in terms of their EHCP assessment is about 400. It's been at that level since about September. We have managed to stabilise it. So that feels as though we're making progress. And we've also managed to stabilise the number of children who are waiting for education psychology assessments. So the fact that you're waiting for an EHCP to be completed does not mean that's the same number as education psychology assessments waiting because they're earlier in the system. So there are currently about 500 education psychology assessments waiting to be completed, but that has stabilised since since October when we started to bring those in, and it was rising month on month. So we are making progress, but it is incredibly slow because we haven't got the capacity to be able to do more of those assessments than the system will allow.
And the ed psych is only one part of the entire assessment, isn't it? So are there any other blockers in the system that you might need to let us know about?
So if you look at the slide, Jane, if you could go back to a slide that's called timeliness, it might be forward or back, I'm not sure. that one, the bottom bit on there that says average weeks taken. So you can see everybody in the system completes an assessment or a document. So schools, health, social care and other people are well within time. They're doing really well. It's education psychology that's holding that up. As those education psychology assessments go through the system, we then have the people in the SEND system who complete those assessments in terms of pull the assessment together and come out with the recommendation, who will also very shortly become overwhelmed as the education psychology assessments start to take hold. So we've also got permission to go out for interim SEND caseworkers to hold that flow as it comes through to try and speed that up once that gets into that place.
Okay, I did half know the answer, but I think it's important to make that point so that people understand better where they are. Members, I've got Nick first, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. I was just looking at this and of course conscious of the protest or the demonstration that we had earlier this month. Is it looking at the 20 weeks, because obviously the 2.3%, the 20 weeks, I mean, is that reasonable? Because I mean, it seems to be from when it's requested, but if it's then declined and they go to tribunal, so does the 20 weeks start from when they first request it? And of course, obviously, if they go through trials and tribunals and then it comes back to being accepted, does the 20 weeks reset, or is it 20 weeks literally from there? Because it seems unreasonable that we're held to 20 weeks if we've initially declined them and then they've gone to tribunal. So that was my first thing. I was wondering whether it was reasonable. And the second one was, again, we have this 20 weeks in the psychologist reports, and looking at one of the graphs, seems we're doing about 40 assessments a month, and that gets us to 50% of the administration or the decisions. So it rather implies that we just need to double the number of educational psychologists we have in order to get up to the 80 a month we need. However, I am acutely aware that some pupils, the evidence isn't always clear cut. You know, they tick some of the boxes, but not all the boxes. And actually it just takes a little bit longer. Some psychologists, you know, will take more assessment, more time. And so I was wondering whether the 20 weeks, you know, whether it should be an average, you know, that most of them can be done in, but actually there are going to be some students who just take a little bit longer. And so I was wondering if some of the delay in it is because we have got students who have taken a little bit longer to be assessed. They've had to go back and find more evidence, or the evidence ticks a few boxes, but not all of them. And so it just adds to that delay. And so I was wondering just whether, you know, we do need to double the number of educational psychologists, or whether actually that's an influencing factor on our delay.
So in terms of the tribunal and mediation processes, so the numbers that I've given you are what we would call initial assessments, so taking out the tribunal and mediation cases, because they don't reset the clock, but they do obviously have an impact on the whole process. And in terms of education psychology assessments, I think education psychologists are pretty good at getting through those assessments in the timescale they're given. They're given a particular number of hours or days to do those assessments. They are very experienced in doing them, and they can pick out complex ones pretty early and make sure they've got all the right information to be able to do it in timescale. Historically, it's not been a problem. It's volume that's causing the problem, not complexity, I would say, at the moment.
Thank you. Martin, Councillor Lovell.
Thank you, Chair. So, for clarification of my point, a parent and a child could be talking in Somerset. Could they be talking to an educational psychologist who happens to be in the far north of Scotland? Thank you.
If their assessment has been agreed as it's suitable for remote assessment, yes, they could be.
Thank you. Sławek.
Sławek Nowakiewicz, coopted member, Schools Forum. I just have one question, Claire, maybe not so much related to the time frame, because we know it's very difficult at this stage with the volume of the EHCPs coming through. And as you said, you opened the gates to process more EHCPs due to the other circumstances. And I do agree that tribunal process wasn't easy for anybody. But I'm just thinking about how that will affect the high needs block, because we already are overstretched. And as we are adding more and more EHCPs, that issue will become only bigger rather than smaller. So I'm just wondering how that kind of, if that's taken into consideration, because it will cause lots of challenges for local authority and the schools. Thank you.
Add a quick bit about what the high needs block, Twilight was mentioning, the funding.
Okay. I'm quite sure I know what you mean. So the high needs block is part of the dedicated schools grant. Is that what you're asking for? Which is the block that funds children with special educational needs for both additional costs in mainstream schools, special schools, or in independent non-maintained schools, or other types of education packages when a child's got a special educational need, and particularly when they've got an education healthcare plan. Oh, it's died for some reason. So in terms of the pressure on the high needs block, yes, this is putting increased pressure on the high needs block, because we are, as parents, our schools are requesting these education healthcare plans. We are identifying more children who need a level of financial support to be able to have their educational needs met. So yes, it is putting increasing pressure on that block, which is very worrying. It has been raised by Phil Revens, who is the LGA lead for SEND, and it's also been raised by every DCS in the country and probably every finance director in the country, that we need the SEND reforms, the government, to tell us what those SEND reforms are, so that everybody understands it, we understand our place in it, and families understand what that means for their child, as for schools too. What does that mean for them and their child? Which we hope will start to calm the system, as people think, oh yes, it's going to be okay. Hopefully their child will get the support they need in a different way or in the same way, whatever those reforms say. But it's perfectly understandable that schools and parents are incredibly anxious about what, because it's so unknown. It's a big black hole. What's this going to mean? And are making requests for their child in a way that they previously may not have done at this point. And I'm really sorry, as a public forum, that this is that the impact of us not having enough education psychology time is that these assessments and the outcomes for children are being very severely delayed.
Thank you. It's a great question. Sorry, a great answer from Claire. I'm just going to sort of, is this a valid point I'm going to make? And you put me right from wrong. I'm just thinking about the alternative to saying yes to assess and then yes to award is that you go through a tribunal, and then they get it in the tribunal, then eventually will usually find in the parents' favour anyway. I think there's something about, it's not really a cost that you can quantify, but there's a benefit to actually engaging in the EHCP process, because you keep the relationship working with the child, with the school, and then hopefully what comes into the EHCP is possibly not as punitive as it might be if it's awarded by a court, let's say. And I mean punitive, I don't mean against the child, I mean against the authority. So, it may come in a more blunt, is that kind of valid to say if we engage with it, even though we haven't got the time, I know, but if we engage with it, we might get a better outcome for the children as well, and be able to step children down when they need to, or change what they need through assessments later. It might be an oversimplification though.
I think I would say if you talk to or listen to parents in terms of their frustrations with the HCP system, it is about communication largely, that they're not getting the right information at the right time. They're very frustrated that we can't tell them when this assessment is going to be completed, what the outcome is going to be. Some of that is about relationships and staff in the SEND casework system being so overworked that they are head down trying to get through pieces of paper and not recognising the importance of that relationship and talking to families. But yes, obviously a relationship-based system is what we're aspiring to, what we want, so that families actually feel able to talk to us and to have calm and collected and sensible conversations about what it is their child needs and how we can best deliver that for them.
It's the reason I asked for the numbers, because what we talked, the fund that we're talking about, the high needs grant for the deficit management plan, is what's being added to each time in the HCP has been agreed it is costing the, so they're linked. That was the bit that I was talking about. Okay, members, so we have two substantive items that we're going to be looking at for the rest of the afternoon, and I currently have Councillor Hunt, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Hadley, Mary online, and Councillor Cravis in the room, all adding to this, and Swabek to potentially come back again. So just to make you aware, of where I am. They're all valid points, but I'm just, if you could be as concise, etc., etc. So Councillor Hunt. You want to come back on that point? Sorry.
If I may, just kind of continuation. Thank you very much, Claire. I think what everybody said, it's absolutely valid. And I know that it's we have a lot of challenges with the EHCPs and the whole process. But what worries me as well, it's not only the increase of the costs of the high needs block, but also it's the capacity to meet the needs. Because the more EHCPs we have, the more potential specialist placement which we requested, and we are already at the capacity. And I know we have the SEND bases which are developing, but they are at this very early stage. And if we look at the number of children coming through, 400 additional EHCPs waiting, once they'll materialize, that causes quite a lot of capacity issues. So that's kind of the point which I was making on there. Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously significant numbers of those children will remain in mainstream school with additional support. So it won't all be about children needing to leave their current school. And I have to say this, that the Department for Education did agree to nearly 3 years ago an additional special school for children with SCMH that was to be based in Wells. They have not, there are no spades in the ground yet. It's meant to be built by March 27. And whenever I talk to the DfE about it, they just say it's on hold. We haven't come to a decision. So some of this is outside our control in terms of that is 60 to 100 additional places for children with SCMH needs. Social, emotional, mental health needs. And we don't have the control over whether that is going to be built, if it's going to be built in a way that's appropriate, and if it's going to actually meet the needs of the children that we have who need that type of provision, which is a large proportion of the group of children that are waiting for provision. So yes, there are lots of factors in here about that we do not have adequate provision in the county. The only way that we can build a new school currently for children is to go through an application to the DfE and get that agreed. We have done that. We've done what we wanted, what we needed to do, but that funding has, that building has not yet had any activity on site.
Hopefully we built a bit better than the last one that we had. Okay, Councillor Hunt. John.
I'll just ask one question, Mr. Chairman. At a recent school governors meeting, I won't name the school for obvious reasons, but there was concern that you mentioned, Claire, that the council is lending support or giving support to schools when in lieu of an EHCP being arrived or a decision arrived at. But it was very noticeable that school was fairly unhappy that there wasn't enough money coming in immediately. I think a figure of £3,000 was mentioned, which clearly doesn't pay for an additional staff person or send a qualified person to help out in the school at that time. So I wonder what nature that is and how we can do better with that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem that we schools I know are unhappy, and they're quite right to be unhappy in a lot of situations, and where they're requesting that additional support while that EHCP is being completed, effectively to put it into a statutory situation. Wherever we can, we do try and provide that support. We only statutorily have to provide that report once the education and healthcare plan has been issued. We don't want to get to a place where that is all we will do. But the funding process, if you like, in terms of making sure that we've got the right support in place, the right staff in place, is quite complex to get agreed. And we sometimes will question schools' requests in terms of looking at, is that exactly what that child needs? Is that the most appropriate provision? Could we do it differently? And let's be honest, could we do it more cheaply? Because of the overspend on that budget, the overspend on the high needs block at the moment is projecting over £60 million at the end of this financial year. By the end of 28-29, if there's no mitigation, and the mitigation we've got in place doesn't work, it'll be over £300 million. That is not sustainable.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not wanting to spend time on all the multifarious reasons for increase and the complexity of it. I want to, and you've talked about the educational psychology service and the issues that we're dealing with there. But this is an education, health and care plan. How are and there have at times in the past been issues with assessments that are not educational assessments, that are more health ones. Where are we with in terms of partner support?
So I think on one of the slides, it does talk about the fact that everybody else, their reports are in time, very up to 6 weeks. Everybody else is doing things on time. We do know that there is a continuing issue in terms of the neurodiversity pathway. So to get a neurodiversity assessment at the moment is over 2 years, which has an impact. The ICB and the Trust are working really hard to make sure that young people do have some level of support in that interim period. I think some parents would say it's not sufficient or they're not getting what their child needs. But again, that is a capacity issue in the NHS in terms of the people available to do those neurodiversity assessments, because of, again, the volume is increasing hugely all the time.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at what we've got at the moment, we've got over 500 cases still in the system waiting to be assessed. I'm assuming that the references that are coming in are still coming in at a fair rate or even faster rate because of the changes in the system that you're talking about. Do the psychs that we've managed to get the funding for, not necessarily got the expertise yet, but if you was to be able to get all those people in place with the funding that we've got, would we still keep up with the level of the referrals that are coming in? And if not, I do fear that some of the older children that are still waiting will end up leaving school before they even get the help or the care that they need. And that is a big concern, because I have got 1 or 2 people talk to me about who are waiting for HCPs in secondary school, and you just know that they're not going to get them. It's going to be too late.
So with the capacity we currently have in terms of our own staff and the additional education psychologists, if we didn't have the backlog, we would be keeping up and have capacity. That's not a problem. We could keep up with the inflow. That's not a problem. It's the fact that we have a 500 in the backlog that is causing us the problem. What we need is the capacity to bring that backlog down to nothing, so that we can then use the capacity we've got and reduce the capacity we've got to manage the inflow. So I'm confident that we've got enough resource with additional locums that we've got in now to manage the children coming in. We just haven't got enough resource yet to manage down the backlog because it's so huge.
And the obvious question is, have we got a plan to try and reduce the backlog?
There is a plan. We still need more education psychologists, so we know roughly how many we need. That the inflow does change. It does change regularly. So we're trying to work through exactly what we need at which point. But we know that we need a significant number more to be able to bring that down in a reasonable time frame.
Thank you. Online then, Mary Cox, please.
Most of my questions have been asked. Just a query really, that backlog. I'm curious to know what the decision-making process was to move away from allowing children to go through the threshold to EHCPs and then reversing that decision, because that decision-making process seems not to have been fit for purpose, having now developed this backlog. And one other point, whilst we've all been talking, looking on the Somerset website, there are no EdPsych jobs on it. So how are you seeking these additional resources?
Thank you, Mary.
So in terms of the decision to reverse the sort of more narrow view, if you like, of what the statutory framework looks like, we did that because we could see that the number of children that we were saying no to assess and no to issue, that was just causing lots of referrals up to tribunal, and they were inevitably at tribunal being pushed back, and we were told to assess and issue. So it seemed like it's silly to carry on with the first way of working. We needed to change that to make that broader, to ensure that we didn't have so many children needing to go to tribunal. We just took them through the normal system. So that decision was made about 12 months ago. In terms of the education psychology roles, we have had, as I said, through a procurement route, we've done full tenders for consultancies to come in to increase the number of education psychologists who could work on an interim basis. The jobs for permanent psychologists have also been agreed, and we have a complex HR process to go through before we can actually get a job onto a website. So we're in that process at the moment in order to be able to get those jobs out.
So do you have a timescale then for when they'll be underway?
For them to be advertised, no, we depend on other people in the system to be able to process their bits of the work. I would hope in the next few weeks, but I can't guarantee that. It depends on how the rest of the system works to get those rolled out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cravis, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I sort of had a couple of little questions, and then of course other questions have been asked and other things have been said, and I've got other questions on top of questions. I mean, what I've realised is that I've been on this committee a couple of years and how little I know about this subject still. And we've had many talks on it and many presentations on it. I mean, first of all, you see the 20 weeks and you think 20 weeks, and then you think actually there's only a small percentage of taking that, and then you think, and I think someone else has touched on this, people leaving school without them, but that's a long time in an academic year if that 20 weeks is going further. And what I don't quite, and we've talked about educational psychologists a lot, but then how long does it actually take to do one of these, do one of these assessments, and do they vary? I've got no idea what they include. I mean, so even if we've got them, how long they take and do they vary? And then of course we talked about school requests are increasing, I think. So we've got this backlog that we could clear, but then we've heard that in other departments that they could clear the backlog, and what happens if we don't clear it? But then you've got the school requests you say are increasing, and why are those school requests increasing? Is that because they're more conscious about losing the tribunal, the tribunal situation where they think the requests will get taken? I don't really understand why what the tribunal was awarding. I think we said both speakers said that the tribunals tend to award in favour of the parents. What was the reason for that? And whether we agree with it or not, I suppose we have to carry on. So it was the actual what the psychological assessment takes. What does it include? And I suppose that links into the previous item when I managed to talk about fostering. How does that work? And is it? I'm going around in circles because it's so complicated. And we talk about prioritising children in care. Well, actually, do you prioritise children in fostering? Is that a priority? And you say this increase is happening nationally. How do we know that increase isn't going to keep going? And what those reasons for increases, which I don't think I've necessarily heard talked about, why those increases are happening. And thank you. I think that's probably all I can. My notes all over the place now.
So the time and education psychology assessment will vary, but it's usually between 2 and 3 days in terms of spending time with the child, looking at all the documentation that the education psychologist needs to consider, and writing a report to set out the recommendation for the education psychologist about the sort of education provision the child needs. We are prioritising children looked after because of their levels of vulnerability. We're prioritising all children looked after, so children in foster care will be part of that. Why are schools requesting more education healthcare plans? For the same reasons parents, I think, that they're very anxious about, will these children get the statutory entitlements that they feel they're entitled to now through the education healthcare plan, and the funding that the school will need to put that in place when the SEND reforms come in. So they're making applications now because they want to ensure that they have got the right funding to put the right support in for that child in their school. And will the increase keep going? Well, I think my view at the moment would be until we get the SEND reforms in, yes, because there is no incentive for it not to. People are just getting increasingly anxious, and to some degree, I expect it to escalate still further as the rumour mills becomes more and more expansive, shall we say, as the SEND reforms get nearer and nearer. So as things start to leak from central government, I think people will get more and more anxious, and there will be a greater volume of requests. So we have to hope that it happens really soon, that those SEND reforms are published, because it's not sustainable for us or any other local authority in the country, both in terms of the capacity in the system to make those assessments, but also the finances to be able to support the provision those assessments say children need.
Sorry, Chair. I know
I'm just conscious, members, 2 substantive items and a break yet.
Yeah, but then this is a very important topic, and I think it needs to take 5 more minutes of our time. It was more a question you said about the SEND reforms, and of course that was one of my initial questions, but we got hijacked by the rest of them. When you say you don't know what it could say, and there's rumours, what sort of things could they be doing? Or what sort of things is everybody expecting? But also, if the government knows this is causing a problem, why are those reforms being delayed? Why are they being delayed? Because surely it falls into, we need to sort this out, but then you could say that about many things. I assume it's coming from government.
We are all asking those questions that you've just asked of central government every single day. When we have a conversation with the Department for Education about anything, they always start the conversation. I had one this morning about nothing to do with this. They start the conversation with, we can't tell you anything about the SEND reforms, so don't ask us. Because everybody is asking questions all the time. I have absolutely no idea what they're going to look like. And I think that's part of the anxiety, is that we can't reassure anybody that they're going in this direction or these are the key principles, because there is absolutely no information or clear.
Okay, members, thank you for that. Thank you for your points. So the recommendations are that we've asked to note and feed in. I think we made a number of points, and a couple of them are, I just thought I'll make recommendations from us. I think that it goes without saying though. So this committee notes the concern in relation to the delay in the SEND white paper, and would hope it would come sooner rather than but the latest announcement is in the spring, but we've yet to figure out when the spring starts and finishes. So keep your fingers crossed in relation to that one. So we note the increase in education psychologists, but we also note the need for more. And what I think one of the recommendations might be that this committee asks our executive member if she could speak with the appropriate people in relation to speeding up the ability to release the recruitment paperwork. I think that's important, because if it's something that we can make it go faster, then it should be something that we need to be doing. The committee notes the concern around the potential financial impact of the situation we're in, delays, but then further education, health and care plans, the potential financial impact. We also note the potential capacity issues further upstream as we start increasing the assessments. I just a little one to add on there. It may be worth committee considering if we can ask our executive member if she could add weight to the request for this school to come forward. There's obviously the EMH school that's been provisioned, and if it's been there if the need's there, then why aren't we getting something to help us going forward? And we note the partner support in this as well. I think that's the bits that we've covered. Nothing else. Thank you. So those form will form our five recommendations. There. So are you happy that I finalised the words, members, and you're happy for them to go forward? Thank you. What I'll do now, it's 4:45. I will take a 10-minute break, and I will restart at 15:55 exactly. Thank you. Okay, members, what we're going to do then, I'm going to pinch a few seconds off of us and conscious that we can get going. Jane, Caddy, thank you for taking the time to come along and speak to us today. Members, I'm sure we're going to pay some serious attention to this next item. So over to Caddy. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Just my job to introduce this, which is nice. So Callie's now been in post as Head of Service for Fostering and Kinship since September. And if you remember back in May, we had a discussion around the fees and allowances for foster carers, and we made a commitment to meet with carers to talk to them about their support needs and how we could better encourage them to stay in Somerset. We've now undertaken that work, and we said we would bring it back in a report. The report has been shared with you. There are a few slides that really just bring the report to life. They will be circulated after, but there's nothing new in the slides. And I know Callie's been scribbling down things as previous questions have come in. So if at the end of this we haven't answered anything, we're really happy to do any follow-up, either conversations or send further information out. So I'll hand over to Callie. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Jane. I'm just going to whiz through really what's in the report, and if people want to ask questions, some of the questions have already come up and probably some of the answers have too, but I'll just go through very quickly. Looking firstly at the fostering fees and allowances, and I'm happy to talk through the consultation that took place with foster carers. Secondly, at the investment in recruitment and assessment foster carers, and then look at the enhanced support that we're putting around fostering households, which includes Mockingbird and out of hours support and support around education. And then the measures that we are hoping will impact on capacity within fostering homes. So that kind of leans to the room to grow business case, which has been spoken about earlier, but also some of the support we hope will increase capacity within fostering households. I'll just go very quickly through the background because I think everybody knows it. The number of children in care in Somerset has increased, but we still have a lower per capita rate of children looked after than our statistical neighbours. And the rate of children in residential care has increased disproportionately. The number of children in foster care has risen since 2023, but it hasn't risen to the extent that it needs to, and it's probably stabilised. The graphic on here that I would draw your attention to is the one in the bottom left-hand corner, which illustrates what proportion of the children in our care are living in a family context. So whether they're living with foster to adopt, with foster carers, with kinship carers, they're living in a family context rather than in a context where people are on shift and change regularly. And that's still has remained reasonably high. The figures are in the report. The table on the purple table illustrates the number of kinship foster carers, which is, as you can see, a steady increase. And the blue table is the in-house foster carers. So again, not a decline, we're bucking the trend, but not the increase that we need and want. So in terms of numbers coming into the fostering cohort and going out, it looks quite positive at this point in this year. We've got 60 new fostering households approved, which creates 21 new homes for children, and a further 11 under assessment. So we're hoping that there'll be 26 new fostering households by the end of the financial year. There may be some dropouts, and it's not clear at this point how many new homes for children that will create, because some foster carers will be approved for 1, some may be approved for 3. And then we can see the pipeline looks quite positive too for the following financial year. There have been 13 fostering households deregistered. 7 of those are for the reasons that you might expect anybody to leave any kind of occupation. So they're for health reasons, for changes within their family, and they're retiring. But there are 6 deregistrations that are the ones that we need to focus on, and 2 of them left because they didn't feel that the support offered to them was adequate, 2 because the complexity of the children's needs, and 2 moved to independent fostering agencies. We talk quite a lot about foster carers moving to independent fostering agencies. What we don't talk about is the fact that foster carers move from independent fostering agencies into the local authority. And I had a conversation with a foster carer last week who spoke about how much she enjoyed fostering for Somerset. And I guess that's what we're trying to achieve for all of our fostering families. So when I came into post, we were kind of in the middle of a consultation process around fees and allowances and the processes for agreeing those. One thing I would say is that foster carers are as diverse as the children that they care for, but they also do lots of different jobs, and we tend to lump them all in together. So some foster carers are looking after parent and child during an assessment periods, others are providing long-term stability for children, and others are providing kind of emergency care for teenagers, and there's other forms too. So not only are they a diverse group, but the job they're doing is a diverse one too. They told us very clearly that we need to prioritise clear communication. We've got a portal being put in place as part of a business case that should improve communication. We've also changed the duty system, which hopefully once that's bedded in will improve communication between foster carers and the services around them. Foster carers are really clear that they want income stability, and there was quite a lot of worry that as they worked with children and children became more stable, their needs reduced, that the fees and allowances would reduce, and they emphasised the need for support around teenagers and children without school places. So those are the kind of messages that we took into the consultation. So we've taken those messages. We've also taken the fact that the children who move into residential care are usually between 10 and 15. And once they go into foster care at that age and into residential care at that age, they're very unlikely to step back down into foster care. We've used an EHCP as evidence of complexity of need. Any child who has an EHCP has an already assessed complex needs and a need for additional support around education. We need to prioritise education, so we need to focus support around children who need more support with education. So we're making a move towards payments based on complexity of need and the centrality of education, and away from the existing model, which has two scales of payment to foster carers, fostering and fostering plus, and looking for something more nuanced. These are the figures, they're in the report. It's an increased financial payment for children between 10 and 15, and a bigger step up for foster carers on the lower fee level, and then an additional payment for children with an EHCP, and a further additional payment for any children out of school for the period they're out of school. It's fairly nominal, that amount, given that the children are in their care full time, but it's to support around getting to education meetings and in recognition of the additional complexity that brings. As you can see, that's an additional £106,300 on top of what's been budgeted, and that's been built into the Next Steps Fostering business case. Talking very quick because I know we've got limited time, but I'll keep going if that's all right. There's lots of elements of the fostering business case and lots of developments around supporting foster carers and fostering households better. The two that I've picked out, is the Mockingbird programme, which I imagine that you'll all be aware of. There's communities, it's based on the principle that you need a village to raise a child, and communities are built around fostering households. We currently have 2 constellations of Mockingbird carers in Somerset, and they're thriving. One took longer to get off the ground, but is now doing really great. A carer recently described Mockingbird as invaluable to me, and they're seeing additional benefits for children that we hadn't predicted, like children being more confident talking to other adults, being able to make wider relationships with those around them. So really positive. I guess the other thing is that IFAs don't offer Mockingbird. It's a useful selling point for the local authority. And then the fostering intervention team is in its inception at the moment. We've got agreement to recruit 8 fostering intervention workers who'll be available to foster carers 7 AM to 11 PM to support in a planned way and when things are in crisis. And I guess to be kind of give some examples of what I think that might look like. It might be a foster carer who's taken an additional child into their home but isn't able to drive them to school because they're driving another child to school. So it might be helping with those kinds of things. It might be helping with pick up from an after school club, or doing some activities with the child to take the pressure off if a foster carer is attending a meeting or training. So that kind of planned work. And then the crisis bits maybe the things that foster carers speak about are things like sitting on the phone to the police when a child has gone missing and feeling very alone in that, holding that risk. Somebody being with them to hold that risk with them, not just on the phone, but physically with them, provides safety, but it provides security as well, and a sense that that risk is held as in the wider team, not within the fostering household. It's not something that's done in very many places, so it is quite new. We think that the impact will be significant of that, but we haven't, we're not there yet. Other elements then more quickly, we're going to have a dedicated worker to support with the comms and the resources for advertising and running events to recruit foster carers. There's a big focus on timely, robust assessment of foster carers, and Somerset has the second speediest route through from expression of interest to approval as foster carers. So that's something that we should be pleased about, and we need to maintain. We've put in place additional panels to support that. We have some additional resource to ensure that children in foster care are able to access timely education. There are, especially children with an EHCP, often there's a delay before the right school can be named for them, and that could place massive strain on fostering households. So we're looking at potentially being able to provide interim education, sometimes through the Homes and Horizons Therapeutic Education Service, to carry that household through that period. I've spoken already about the portal, and then we're building on the existing mentoring schemes and fostering community groups and community hubs for foster carers to help foster carers who aren't part of Mockingbird to also still feel part of and build up their community involvement. That's it.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much for the report and everything coming through. First up, Peter. No?
Yeah, it's a real, excuse me, a really general question. It's about kinship fostering, as I mentioned earlier. Are we absolutely convinced? I can see the graph is going up and up and up, and that's a good thing to try and keep families and children together. But are we totally confident that this is the best route forward for the safety of the child and assessments and that kind of thing? Because we don't take children away lightly, and for a very good reason. So.
I haven't got it to hand, but the research shows that outcomes for children who grow up in kinship foster care tend to be more positive. So that indicates that in general, that is a positive outcome and a positive effect. We have very robust assessments that are completed in order for children to be carers to be approved to care for children. I think of it as kinship carers as adults who already care about that child, stepping in to provide the day-to-day care for them. And what we see is that the trauma that children experience from coming in away from their environment and their community is less when they go into a household full of people that they already know.
And we've got the adequate social workers to do all these assessments.
We have a business case in around further assessing social workers.
Thank you. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely support what you're doing, what you're trying to do, and the move away from the rather coarse differentiation between foster carers to something much more detailed and nuanced. It's quite tricky when you see on a slide so and so 0% increase, and I understand it's part of the change. Can you just assure me that those people who are now fostering plus will be part of the new system where they get where they will be able to get the financial support for the complexity of the children and the new system.
Absolutely. So foster carers get to, I mean, you probably, or forgive me if I'm saying things people already know, but they foster carers get a fostering fee and a fostering allowance. So the allowance will go up for everybody, and it's the fee that is just frozen this year, and the fee is the smaller part of the payment for most age ranges. And they also would get the EHCP and the other additional payments. So everybody will get an increase, but some people will get more than others.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. That's really helpful, because I think some of the misunderstanding earlier in the year was around people feeling that they were A, not wanted, and B, were not going to be part of the new system, and they clearly are, and that's great.
Absolutely, absolutely, and very much wanted.
Do we still run? There used to be recruitment drop-ins, so we had a couple of people that would go around different places, asking, discussing recruitment, etc. So is that something we still operate?
Yes, and part of the new service, it is an increase in a 0.6 FTE to complement the worker who already does that role, so that we've got a little bit more capacity to do that. Coffee and a cuppa with a foster carer, I think it's usually called on social media.
It's good. I remember it must be probably more than a year ago now that I saw one advertising my area, and I turned up, and I nearly scared the poor gentleman to death. So, because when I introduced myself, but it was really interesting to understand what the process was, and I think one of the things that we may want to consider is using the local councillor as well. So it may be worth. We'll have conversation outside of this. Perhaps Heather will do something to link that recruitment to the local council. So there might be a better place to do it. In other words, that those sorts of questions. Where's the best place to go to run a recruitment, and then bring the local councillor with them potentially. That might be something to look at. I think the Mockingbird scheme sounds really exciting, and it's something that I've heard about before. You talked about foster intervention team. And I may have misunderstood, but I just maybe just to try and help it. That sounds like a really good initiative, but if you're talking about the transporting a young person somewhere, or just the more low level interventions, why would there have to be a social worker?
They're not social workers.
It's
not a social work team. It's an intervention team for intervention worker team, so it's a different grade. But it is, it's two workers at any moment for a high number of children and foster carers. So it's not going to do all of the things that we could hope it would do. But if it's successful, I think we'll be able to see an impact on stability for children, foster carers feeling more supported, and potentially improved retention, and that leads to improved recruitment. So
it sounds exciting, because
6 months' time and be able to tell you what the impact has been.
No, it sounds like a really great opportunity, because previously I've heard that I've been in rooms with social workers where ex-social worker had to get up at 6:30 this morning because they had to go somewhere to pick a young person up to transport them. So another level of support would help, potentially free up social work time, is what I'm trying to get at. That sounds like a really great intervention. Yeah, Evie.
Sorry, I know we've spoken before, but my concern is with foster carers that have got children that aren't in education. How well are they going to be supported during this period? You said having a cuppa with somebody. It's really important that they get out and have those connections with other people. So what's in the pipeline for those that are that little bit more isolated, please?
Well, that's one of my hopes from the fostering intervention team, is that they will be able to do exactly that. So they'll be able to spend some time with the child while the foster carer can either do training or groups, or even attend meetings. Because one of the things that we forget, I think, quite often is how many meetings foster carers are asked to. Saying this to the wrong person. One of the number of meetings that foster carers are asked to attend for the children that they're caring for is quite significant. So some support around those times, I think, could be really impactful.
Thank you. this committee have always fully supported our fostering campaign, our foster carers, and the team that support them. And I think it's something that we will continue to do. And I know that we did a push recently at full council where there was a desk drop of lots of stuff promoting it. We will always, I know, do our best to promote and support it if we can. And thank you for the report. I don't think there are. I just checked to make sure the recommendations are that Scrutiny notes the actions taken to date, informed by foster carers' feedback, and how it's shaping the approach to foster care and kinship care in the county. So we support that, and we thank you for your time. But I will say, Callie, if there is anything you think that this committee might be able to do to help speed up your process to support you better, then please don't feel free to reach out, and don't hesitate to do that. We'll do what we can.
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Thank you for that. That's item 8 of our agenda. Then there was a comfort break which we squeezed in somewhere else. Okay, so just for clarity, we're going to go into agenda item 9. What we're going to do is we're going to ask that members support us going into confidential session. We haven't got any members of the public, but it will pause the recording, mainly because some of the conversations that we'll have would want to make sure that they stay within the room, they're commercially sensitive and stuff like that. Going forward, so that we can have the update. But what I will then do is stay in confidential setting for the next 2 items, which is just to note the information and our forward plan, neither of which will have massive input, I know, but it just make it a little bit easier for us. So members, are we happy that we go into confidential session? So that's any objections? No, that's done.